want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for the Harriman City Council debates. My name is David Figge. I am a resident of Harriman as well. As you're aware, local government sometimes has an even greater effect on our lives than does federal government. It's where the day-to-day decisions are made that can change the way we live in both a positive and hopefully not often negative way. Your choice this evening to join us and to hear these candidates is a clear reflection that you care deeply for this great city, our great city, Harriman. After being elected, two of the people on this stage will each carry with them 20% of your vote to make decisions for this community. In hearing what they say tonight, we are hopeful that you will get a clear picture as to who represents you and who represents you in the closest way to who you are. Tonight's format will be a little bit unique. You will notice we have 4 people up here instead of 2. We'll get to that in just a second. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to introduce themselves and their election platform. Candidates will be asked to maintain focus on their respective campaign and platforms, and please no personal attacks on any other candidates, the panel, former elected officials, or anybody else. Those attacks will not be tolerated. Technology usage throughout the event will be prohibited, and that also includes those in the audience. Candidates' responses will be limited to 2 minutes after a question is asked to them. And the questions will cover various subject matter, including experience, economic development, transparency, housing, budgeting, and infrastructure. The production staff will keep their eyes on the elapsed time and will enforce the limits. They will do this when you have 10 seconds left. That way you will know. I, as the moderator, reserve the right to prompt a follow-up question after a candidate had his time for an initial response. Closing statements will allow each candidate an opportunity to speak about themselves and why they are the best choice to represent you. It is not a time to make an additional attack or make charges that have not previously been brought up or raised during the debate. Tonight's order, because we have 2 separate groups, District 1 and District 4 represented, will be as such. We are going to start from this corner, moving across. We're going to have the 2 candidates come up. A question will be asked. They will have time to respond. And then after responding, they will go back to their seats, followed by the other table. They will come up and respond to that same question. I will repeat the question. At the end, we will reverse that order. And we'll have this table come up first, with you taking the last question. All right, everybody ready? Deep breaths. Candidates, let's have some fun and enjoy yourselves. Thank you, Harriman. Let's go ahead and have you 2 come on up. Excellent. Let's begin. Will you please introduce yourself and take 3 minutes?
Hopefully I won't take the whole 3 minutes. I can think of other more fun things to do, but happy to be here tonight. For those who don't know me, Jared Henderson, District 1, which is basically the north end of town. I don't know what all anybody really wants to know or who doesn't know a lot about me at this point, but I'm married to a saintly woman that has put up with me for, believe it or not, over 25 years now. 3 kids. We moved to Harriman in 2009. I'm a certified financial planner. I've been in finance for 22 years. I'm a soccer nut. I coach several youth teams in addition to all these sorts of things. I'm running to represent my friends and neighbors. We got involved in this several years ago. A few years after we moved in, saw development happening and decisions being made that we did not agree with, saw the process was flawed, saw that there was a need, and we kind of had to make a decision, and I say we as a family and really even as a neighborhood, to either do what a lot of our neighbors were doing and leave what seemed to be a bad situation going the wrong way, or get involved and work hard to change things. We chose the latter, and it's been a long, difficult journey, but a rewarding one. I think that we've accomplished a lot of things, but there is a lot more to do. There's a long list of accomplishments, but the things that I really want to focus on going forward are building on those accomplishments, holding developers accountable, making sure that these development agreements hold up, economic viability for the city. These areas that we've preserved, we need to make the most of. I'm sure I'll get a chance to address many more of those things. The long-term financial planning, if you've been paying attention to this last year, I've been a hawk as far as the city budget. I got us out of UPD, UFSA, and I'm on the finance committee for UFA, trying to steer them in the right direction to make them long-term viable service providers for the city. So hopefully that's enough of a baseline about me. I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Roberts, and I'm running for Harriman City Council District 1. I'm a lifelong resident of Utah, and my family and I have called Harriman home for 3 years now. I am passionate about making our community a better place for everyone. Professionally, I work in law enforcement. I worked for the Department of Corrections for 15 years. This is a challenging role as I serve the community, not only making sure and ensuring the security and safety of our correctional facilities, but my role for the last 12 years in my career has been working to keep the community safe. I work in the field as a law enforcement officer, assisting those that are on parole and probation enhance and change their lives for the better. I have 3 kids and a wife at home. I've been married for 14 years. And when we moved to Harriman, our children began to thrive. I want to keep that as we continue to grow because I think the city is only half built out, and we are going to be a major part of the Salt Lake Valley's economy as we continue to grow. And we're going to be a very large community here very, very soon in the near future. And I want to be a part of making those decisions that make sense while we continue to keep our charm here in Harriman. I'm running for city council because I believe it's time for new representation in District 1. Most of the area is filled with families new to Harriman. I also want to listen to those who have been here for much longer, as well as those that have been here for generations. And I want to be involved in the decisions that make sense for all of us while keeping Harriman the charming community that it is. I believe residents should have a say in the decisions that affect their lives, and I am committed to making sure that their voices are heard. I will, if elected, I will continue my work in the community and being engaged in those community events. Open doors of discussion to meet with other stakeholders and leaders and elected officials often to promote responsible and sensible growth. I know what it takes, my experience in law enforcement working for the state of Utah, to have a seat at the table and how important that is with other stakeholders in our community, such as Utah Transit Authority, our neighbors, and other businesses that are out here and are part of building the community. Also professionally, I'm involved with the legislative process with my involvement with the Utah Fraternal Order of Police. I currently sit as the legislative committee chair and help that organization make decisions, responding and making choices and promoting public safety decisions statewide. That's all I have.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah. Please.
All right, welcome tonight. My name is Matt Bello. I am running for District 4, which the south end, so we have north and south. So very fast-growing part of the city. And if you haven't been over there lately, you probably wouldn't recognize it. So I decided to run actually, one of the main reasons is because of the Rosecrest Master HOA. I'm sure we'll get into more details with that, but it was one of those kind of, I'm just fired up and I want to try and do something about it. Nothing against what Steve's done an awesome job, but that's this is way beyond. So being one of those townhome owners in Rosecrest, it made me want to. So I am 35 years old. I have worked in a number of different areas. I guess I've been told I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. But I also really enjoy that. I love to learn new things and dive right in. I go right at it head first. whenever I am given a new task. So my husband and I have lived here in Harriman for 5 years. And again, like I said, just townhomes right behind the beautiful new park over there on Sentinel Ridge, which has been awesome. So way better than the eyesore it was for the last few years before I moved in. So I am pretty much an open book. This has been a interesting experience so far, running for city council. Never thought I'd do this. I've talked on TV multiple times since I've worked for ABC4, most recently on Good Things Utah. But this is a whole other animal. So bear with me tonight, and that's me.
Please.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the compliment. My name is Steve Shields. I'm running for re-election for District 4. For the past 3.75 years, I guess, I have been serving as a city councilman for District 4, and I'm very proud of the service that I've been able to render during that time. I came into the position reluctantly. I don't think anybody really, well, hopefully doesn't aspire to this. This is not a job I would, boy, I want to grow up and be a city councilman. But I have really come to enjoy the time that I've been able to serve in the community and for the things that we've been able to do. A couple of highlights. I have been married for almost 16 years to my lovely wife, Lindsay. I have 5 children, 3 of which are still at home, and I'm proud of them and all the amazing things that they're accomplishing in their lives. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to be here. I am grateful for their sacrifice and for the time that they allow me to spend away from home. During the past 3 years, 3.5 years, 3.75 years, we have worked really hard as a community to improve. When I ran under a platform of making sure that we were going to hold those accountable who had made the decisions that were, I think, negatively impacting our community in a lot of ways. The incredible rapid growth, the mix of housing that we were experiencing, the power that developers were having over so much of our city. I was very adamant that as a community, as a city government, we couldn't be relying on one-time fees to fund our ongoing operations, and I made it a mission that we were going to be ceasing that. I also wanted to make sure that on a go-forward basis, that we were going to improve the development agreements that we were making and try and claw back some of the concessions that we had made in the past. And I'm proud to say I can check all of those boxes. We've accomplished all of those things in the last 3 years. We've changed over city management. We've changed over the way that we do master development agreements from the ground up. We have a new city attorney. We have a new city finance manager. We have moved away completely from any one-time fees being used to fund ongoing operations. We still have a ways to go in making sure that we have a long-term balanced and robust budget, but I think we're on our way there. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to the questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll have you come on up with the first question. Yes. So since you went first the first time, we're going to start with you, if that's okay. This question is a little bit different from your introduction. What experiences do you have that makes you the best candidate for the position?
Well, let's start what brought me to Harriman, building a home. Building a home and seeing the development, I asked a lot of questions. I asked a lot of questions about my home builder. I asked a lot of questions of those in the community, called the city several times, and got a lot of great answers from the city. As a matter of fact, the city and its staff were the most helpful in the building process, and everybody else was not. So with that regard, it was building that home. We had to bring a lot of people into the room. We had to have discussions. There were some issues with the layout and with our home, and we got those worked out. But now that our neighborhood is built out, we're in what's called a homeowners association. It doesn't make any sense. These developers have come out here and we make these plans, and they come out with these ideas, and we want this community to look this way. And they want it to look that way now, and that's perfect. That's great for now. But what does it look like in 10 years or 30 years or 40 years from now? And the answer that the developers give the city is, oh, it's going to be in an HOA. Well, then the problem is that they put community services in these neighborhoods and they have public streets. And so that's one of the things that I want to fight out is I'm breaking through these barriers with these people that have come up and the agreements of how we've been built out. I live in an HOA. My street is public access. It is on the primary plow plan for the city. I pay $40 a month and I don't know what I'm paying for. I would really like to move forward and make sure that when the rest of Harriman is built out, that those decisions, like the one in my community, aren't the ones that the rest of Harriman has to live with, and that we can make sense to what's going on with this. Other things that make me the best candidate for Harriman is just my experience and the ability to engage with the community and have a seat at the table.
Thank you. What experiences do you have that makes you the best candidate for this position?
I'd say on the personal side, on the financial industry, specifically as a certified financial planner, I think I bring a unique skill set, and that's been evident in my years on the council so far, and be able to look at long-term planning and projections and disseminate that information and implement some of those plans that most governments, at least local governments it seems in Utah, really haven't implemented or even thought along those lines. When I mentioned when I first got involved in all of this, really, I'd say that's the biggest thing. My home was one of 9 homes that were noticed about 300 acres that were being annexed into the city at a density of, and what I found out was an average of 8 units an acre. With just a blanket, they can put it anywhere. I called and tried to get information, was given the runaround, in my opinion, even misled, so they've had to deal with me for several years now. From that conversation, from the Saturday we received a letter to the Thursday of the meeting, I, at my own expense, time and effort, me and my family, my kids running flyers around, we made copies, I wrote a letter, made copies, and delivered it to hundreds of homes in the community to let them know what was going on, because literally only 9 homes knew about it. 300 acres, 3,000 units. We had several hundred people show up at that meeting. And really, the responsible growth movement was born from there. We organized, we stayed involved, we had people at every meeting, whether it was the council meeting or any of the others, to make sure we knew what was going on, we were involved. Since being on the council, worked to preserve commercial. The auto mall is one thing I want to see through. That was going to be all apartments, until I suggested that they give us a chance to show that it was commercially viable. We put a clause into that agreement that allowed that to happen. My experience with UPD, UFSA, UPD, I found the way for us to get out, save us millions of dollars, increase our service level. UFSA, same thing. I'm now serving on the Finance Committee as the chair there, as I mentioned.
Thank you. Gentlemen. Same question, I will repeat it. Steve, will begin with you. What experiences do you have that makes you the best candidate for the position?
Thank you. Without this being too flippant or cliche, I would say experience is what makes me the best candidate. This is a tough position to come into cold. It is like drinking through a fire hose for 2 years. The amount of information that you have to digest, the number of meetings that you have to go to, the amount of topics that you have to be knowledgeable about, from development to budgets to municipal finance to all the different levels of government and how they all work together and all those levels of communication. It is a challenge to master. And in the last 3.5, 4 years I've been here, I've had a really chance to develop a pretty strong skill set in that area. Secondly, outside of the city, I've also represented our city on several other boards and councils. I served as chairman, vice chairman and chairman of the Association of Municipal Councils, which is an organization that represents all of the cities and townships inside of Salt Lake County. I've also served on the Wasatch Front Regional Council's Regional Growth Committee, and I've been able to impact some changes in the fact that the way that projects have been awarded in the past were subject to a certain criteria, and able to challenge that dogma or that thinking to rewrite the criteria by which they determine which cities are prioritized, which has worked much to the advantage of the city of Harriman. Outside of that, I think I'm been transparent and articulate on the issues that are facing our city, been accountable to the residents, letting them know what I support, why I support it, and informing them on the key issues. Thank you.
So I would say the thing that makes me the best option candidate for the position is I'm right down in District 4 is made up, if people are aware, of pretty much the entire east side of Mountain View corridor, and then some few of the neighborhoods above. But like I mentioned before, Rosecrest was the reason that I got involved, and that's because I've done a lot of talking. I served on my HOA board as the president. Wasn't able to get anywhere with the Rosecrest Master HOA, which is supposed to be our master, and so I have taken it upon myself to really get involved with the community. And I thought I was involved before, but the last few weeks have been they've been awesome. Tiring, but awesome, being able to walk around and delivering door hangers, talking to people. And I'll be honest, I was questioning if I was the right man for the job, but it's when you really just are, it's a people position. You're just talking with people, just like you, that live in the city, just like you. They want similar things. They want to save their money. They want to enjoy their days. They want to maybe not work the whole day away. They want time to spend it in a community that is something of theirs. And so that's where I feel like, my background has been very diverse. My most recent position as a producer on the show, I don't know if anybody knows, behind the scenes on TV, it's chaos. But what you see on TV is great. But the hoops that you have to jump through to make it look so great, something that I'm used to, I really love doing. I gave it up actually to be able to pursue this a little bit more. We'll see what happens if I don't win. But the main reason is and I've actually been substitute teaching just to kind of get a feel for what the students, which are your children that are in this district, and what they're like. So I think just being an everyday guy makes me the best person's position, coming in with really just everyday citizen knowledge.
We're going to have you two remain, and we're going to reverse the order now. So I'm going to begin with you, Matt. This next question is on finance. The question is, how will you manage the city's debt and ensure it is paid back at a faster rate?
So I'm not very familiar with the finance part. Steve is definitely probably more capable with the finance aspect than I am. I do consider myself one step above a regular citizen. I'd show up to a few more city council meetings than maybe the average person. I know I've gone around my neighborhood and they're like, I don't even know where the city hall is. So it's like, okay, well then I guess I'm not doing so bad after all. I do love to go on the website and read through the minutes, and maybe I don't want to sit through the 5-hour meetings, which I guess I'm signing myself up for if I get elected. But it really is fascinating to see how the city government works. There is a solution to every problem. Money happens to be a big issue. I've gotten a few emails about money and tax dollars being spent by the city. Even just a few weeks ago, we heard with the fiber internet that people from all sides of it that love it or hate it. I think that really when it comes down to money, if it needs to be spent to better the livelihood of our citizens, then that's what needs to happen. I mean, our country's been has trillions of dollars of national debt, and we're still operating. Not necessarily the best, but we're not near to that level. I think that we still have a chance, being one of the newer cities in the valley, to get it, kind of wrangle it in, kind of take a look at what we have so far, which is growing tremendously, and just kind of dial it down into small bite-sized pieces that we can slowly get rid of that and kind of get to an even and maybe even back in the black. So.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Just once, I want to make sure I answer all of it.
100%. How will you manage this city's debt and ensure it is paid back at a faster rate?
It's an interesting question. The greatest portion of the debt that the city has were bonds that were issued for the construction of this building that we're in right now. That's going to be paid on a schedule over 30 years. There are some additional bonds that were taken out. For example, a bond was taken out to help pay for the widening of Main Street. That is being serviced over a short period of time and the payments are being made by an award that was given by the state to our city on an annual basis for the next 15 years. So that debt is being serviced without any obligation on the taxpayers. It's coming from the state through that. In reference to how we are managing the debt, as a city council person, I've been very careful or adamant about making sure that we are using debt for the right reasons at the right times. I don't think it's appropriate for us to borrow for everything that we do, but there are some times where the needs of the city are urgent and important, and therefore we can't wait for incremental impact fees to be collected over 10 or 15 or 20 years when there's infrastructure that needs to be taken care of now. So for example, we did issue a water fund bond 18 months ago, 24 months ago, to help build some water tanks and some infrastructure to provide water for some of the new developments going in the south end of the city. As far as how we can accelerate the payments on that, I think the important thing for us as a city is to make sure that now that we've removed ourselves from weaned ourselves from the one-time funds funding our budget, we're pretty lean right now. Our ability to make extra payments or advanced debt payments is somewhat curtailed because of that. But as we grow our economy, add businesses, those increased sales tax revenues will help us to pay that off a little faster.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John. Jared, this time we'll begin with you.
Okay.
Should we repeat it? Yes.
So to ensure the two parts of the question, and
Yes.
how we ensure that the debts are paid and how will we pay them back faster?
Correct.
So one, it's tough to go third or fourth because a lot of things have been said already. As Steve mentioned, really any of the debt that the city has is geared more towards infrastructure. You mentioned water, roads. This building, the biggest bond was for this building and several roads, the projects at that time, which coincidentally was approved and passed right before I was sworn in, because they knew that I had issues with those things. They already got that done literally the last meeting in December before I was sworn in January. How will we make sure that those are paid back? Through the budget process every year, which is open, transparent. It's 6 months plus at every single meeting, seems from January to June when we adopt that budget. And part of that, the first thing at the top is paying those debts and then assigning those funds where we can, especially capital projects. How would we look at paying it back faster? I'll mention just a few things in particular. I mentioned earlier getting out of UFSA, the taxing entity for the fire department. Right now we're ahead a few $1 million a year by controlling that money ourselves. By exiting that taxing district, we keep the money here in Harriman and we contract for service with UFA and pay them basically to man those stations. Now we own the stations, we have that money. We have to then replace the stations, build new stations. Part of that separation agreement that I helped negotiate for the city was that we had to finish our obligation on the existing bonds with UFSA, basically the county-wide fund. So we are carrying that, but as we're saving a few $1 million a year, we'll be paying those back at a faster rate so that we can free those funds up then to rebuild 103 and build new stations. So kind of same answer for the rest of them. As we improve our efficiencies through a lot of things that Steve and I have mentioned that we've done the last few years, we're looking to put those funds to work. Some of those bonds, however, cannot be paid back faster, right? The stipulations of those investments say that they have to be paid over that schedule. They can't be done early. Those that can be, we will.
Chris, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
How will you manage the city's debt and ensure it is paid back at a faster rate?
Managing debt. I worked for the government for 15 years of experience, and I've seen very lean budget times with the state, and I've seen years where we can spend a little bit more. On those years where we're forced to be lean, in my experience in government, we as employees of the government were asked by the taxpayers and the governor at the time to see where we could reduce costs. Now, I say that with the city, and I want to ensure our city employees that I just spent the afternoon looking at the budget, and it is pretty lean. There's a lot of there's a lot done with the city budget that I appreciate. There are those bonds that have been mentioned, and they have a schedule to be paid off. Just kind of looking at that, where can we cut? Things that have been said is we need to avoid debt like we should, and when we need to looking at issuing more bonds or facing that, we need to make sure that we're doing it at the right time for the right purpose. And then also, there's been a lot that has been done already, like Mr. Henderson said, with the tax, with the Unified Fire Authority, that tax, the public safety, Harriman getting its own police department. That was a great decision that I think has saved just understanding how law enforcement budgets work and how the county budget works on that regard. That saved Harriman City residents millions and make sure that we were getting those right services. So as we continue to look at that, that's what I would do, is this kind of where can we be a little more smarter with money? But again, it's hard because we're already operating on such a lean budget.
I'm going to have you two remain. We're going to start with you again, Chris. This is on finance as well. Would you consider making budget cuts from events and other non-essential services?
So our quality of life in Harriman has, it's awesome. I think our programs, our city-supported programs, are fantastic. I understand that the city supports the nonprofit Friends of Harriman, and they have the avenues to raise money. I think if we look at that stuff and continue to kind of focus on that and help them and support it, I think the city council can do huge things for that and bringing that thing so we can kind of focus on a nonprofit to kind of help with those events and those programs. Something that's come up as I've knocked on doors and I've met with voters is, well, why do we need fireworks? And my answer is, well, because we're pyros, aren't we? But that's kind of a thing, you know, there may be some years where we kind of look at those types of things and we go, you know what, we can't have that big of an event, or we can't support this year. We need to focus on the money for this project because that comes. We're facing the economy right now. It's a tinderbox. I don't know how, as the world, how we're able to get through and what we're going to do. I think as the inflation, rising interest rates, and all those things, there's going to be times in our near future where we're going to have to look at those budgets and kind of cut and save money. And hopefully it doesn't impact the community events. And if it means that I got to be the one that lights the fireworks, then sign me up.
A very short answer to that question is yes, and I have. I think, and again, if you paid attention to any of the budgetary discussions, I'm a broken record that our primary responsibility, as council members, that's our primary responsibility, is the budget, right? And we are stewards of my friends' and neighbors' tax money, let alone my own. And our focus should be on primary essential services: water, roads, public safety, in my opinion, a lesser extent, parks, etc. If we focus on those things, water, roads, public safety, community pride in our community is important, and those events are important. But I think there can be too many, and too much time and energy can be spent there. They're a lot more fun, and we do need some of them, but there needs to be that balance, which is why I pushed for several years for this nonprofit and having new council members come in and support that. That's happened this last few years, which I think is going to make a big difference on that side of things. So short answer is yes, I have done and will continue to.
Thank you. Gentlemen. Same question, starting with you this time, Steve. Would you consider making budget cuts from events and other non-essential services?
Yes, and we have discussed and considered those in several times. I just want to make a quick statement here. So I think there's a profound misunderstanding that money that is spent for a park is taking away from money that is spent on a road, or money that are spent on roads are taking away from money that are spent on education or things like that. In municipal government, money is budgeted into certain buckets. The revenues come in and they're put into a certain bucket, and it's very siloed. So money that comes in to pay for parks can only be used for parks. Money that comes in for roads can only be used for roads. Money for stormwater can only be used for stormwater. And we can't mix and match those. So sometimes the money we're spending for a park has nothing to do with whether or not we can build a new road, and vice versa. So I think it's important to understand that. I did an analysis just in our last budget. If we cut all the money we spend for the Arts Council, the Harriman Town Days, the rodeo, the Night of Lights, the Harriman Howl, and all of the other community events that we have combined, we could not pay the salary of one police officer. This idea that somehow we're being frivolous or not careful with the amount of money that we're spending is kind of silly. We have very, very small budgets. Fireworks is $15,000 a year. We could cut that, save it for 100 years, and it wouldn't pay for 1/10 of the widening of Harriman Main Street. We're very, very lean as a city. We have frozen hiring. We have avoided a lot of projects, postponed them. We are being very responsible with residents' money. I'm very confident in saying that.
Go ahead and repeat the question, just make sure I
No
hit
problem. Would you consider making budget cuts from events and other non-essential services?
it. Yeah, the answer is no, because I do believe there is a certain importance in events to bringing the public together and our community together. Sure, you can have church events, you can have, there's still a lot of separate things. You know, I'm not a member of the church, but my neighbor might be. We may not go to the same events together. There's something about the last couple of years, and hats off to that guy right over there, Mayor Palmer, because I feel more involved with the city and all the events that have happened in the last 2 years than I have in the almost 6 years that I've lived here. I don't remember ever seeing mayors out at every single event and seeing, I mean, that would be my goal, is to push for the arts and, you know, push for more of that, if anything. But it can be done with public-private partnerships. I was just mentioning this day, we had a podcast we did talking about this, and I think the biggest thing is there's money out there to be grabbed for these types of purposes. George and Dolores Eccles DeRay, their foundation gives to the arts all the time. Why can't they have a building in our city? Do we need a grant writer that's going to approach and get those grants? It's not necessarily about the cuts. It's about getting more money to come in, not from property taxes. We don't need property tax increase to go out and get a grant from somebody. So I think that I mean, I'm a big supporter in the arts. I don't think that right now, I don't know as much about the budget because I haven't seen it, but that's something to me that sits very special, that, you know, we're nothing if we don't have, we're not a unified city.
We're going to have you two remain. Matt, we're going to begin with you, and we're going to move the questions now to economic development. What are some of the biggest challenges facing Harriman in regard to economic development, and what are your plans for mitigating said challenges?
We're not a destination city. Nobody comes here because they want to go out and see what's new in Harriman. People from Salt Lake don't come here because, wow, they've got a great big park, or they have this Real field, but there's not really as many events as I thought there was going to be at it. I mean, I thought that was going to be personally a big thing. That's right down the street from me. I don't see near as many events going on. And that's the kind of stuff, though, those cars that are going to those events is what's driving the economic development. Those businesses that are in Academy Village right now over in my district that are just right behind my house, they're struggling. I mean, that Lock 31 Outfitters, I just had a discussion with him. They are in the hole a lot. I mean, they moved here from Pennsylvania, and there's not really anything that anybody can do except for go in and shop there. But we need to be better as a city to push for that. I know we have a Chamber of Commerce that helps with that, but we as a city, we are leaders. We need to show that that's where we are going, you know. And again, I like the fact that the mayor has been doing that a lot lately. We've had a few different grand opening events that have been over there. He's been at every single one of them that I'm aware of, and seeing that on social media. we're in a very young district. This district has a lot of younger audience, and they are on social media, and they have money to spend. So if we get that message out there that this is happening, and wow, come out here, enjoy this, that's going to be a domino effect that's going to bring another business in. They're going to see, wow, they're doing pretty good out there. There's a lot of traffic. We need to get more out there. We need to go and explore putting a thing out. You know, Iceberg is getting ready to open right up there. It's unfortunate circumstances how they left their spot, but I think it's great. That's a positive for me. That's going to be more traffic. And it's responsible traffic. I think that's the most important part, that we need other cities to come in and help support our city to grow.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I'm clear. Economic development has been, I think, a part of almost every meeting we've had as a city for the past 4 years. We talk about it all the time. The hard part is as a city, we don't own businesses and we don't own the land, and we can't tell what businesses, where they're going to go build their business. We have had a lot of negotiations and discussions with potential businesses and suitors. There's some very exciting things in the hopper right now that we're hoping to be able to announce sometime early next year that are going to be transformative in terms of our city economy. We are working hard with the Auto Mall to get that several dealerships under construction, some auto dealerships, a boat dealership, an RV dealership. They're underway. The hard part is, what can we do as a council to do that? And I think that it's important to understand that the challenge of our geographic isolation, Councilman Henderson uses the term cul-de-sac. Not a lot of people come into the cul-de-sac unless there's things that are here. And we've worked hard over the past few years to create amenities that will bring people here. We worked with the county to help create the new NHTSA bike course that's out here in the Butterfield Canyon corner. I was just there last weekend. There were over 1,000 cars there. I've never seen so many people at an event in Harriman. It was fantastic. As we continue to widen the roads that go out there, as we continue to build some businesses that will capture some of the revenue that those people are going to be bringing into our city. Another thing that we're working on is a big regional park that will have a sports complex that will have up to 40 different fields on it that will be able to host national events. When those come in, they'll be able to drop their money here in the city. But we also have to make sure that we have the right businesses, hotels, restaurants, other amenities that will service those people when they come into our city.
Thank you. Gentlemen. Jared, we're going to begin with you. I'll repeat the question. What are some of the biggest challenges facing Harriman in regard to economic development, and what are your plans for mitigating said challenges?
I need like 20 minutes to talk about this one. So challenges primarily is location. I'm so glad that the Jaredism of cul-de-sac is sticking, and that's starting to be used here, because that's really what Harriman is, right? Location, location, location. Nobody comes here unless they live here. We don't have employment centers. Despite our efforts to get them here, we can't force landowners to build them. They've chosen the big ones, Rio Tinto, and those that own Olympia Hills have chosen residential. We can't force them to build those things, so people live here. What else do we have, though? Our proximity to potential recreation. Yellow Fork, Rose Canyon, Butterfield. We've been working with the county, other entities to get more recreation out this way. We need people to come here and spend their money and go home and get their services, right? To me, that's our winning formula. So things like the athletic complex, which is near and dear to my heart, which I've got to see over the line to get this done. We can talk more about that. And then I've called it our commercial nets. We need to set up these tax nets. So preserving commercially viable areas. The Auto Mall that I mentioned next to Mountain View Corridor is going to be apartments. It's going to be auto and commercial areas. Anthem, Olympia Hills were negotiated. It's a bad situation, but we're going to try to get the most out of it. South Jordan, if you don't know, has annexed all the property around it. It's all going to be homes. So we need to set up our commercial nets and kind of do a Riverton to them and catch that money coming and going. I can talk forever about a lot of things, but those are the basics.
Thank you. Chris, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, let's make sure we got it.
What are some of the biggest challenges facing Harriman in regard to economic development, and what are your plans for mitigating said challenges?
Yeah, it's been said this evening that We have some geographical issues with the city. Right edging and coming through a good portion of our city is, and especially District 1, it's a little expressway. It's called Mountain View Corridor. And the east-west travel and the infrastructure. Eventually, as we build out here in Salt Lake County, we are going to have the Point and Draper and the inland port to the far, far north of us, out by where the Utah State Correctional Facility currently is. One of the major corridors for the traffic in between the two, Mountain View Corridor. Our biggest challenges with that right now is that in our little southwest area of the valley here, we have 8 intersections and 5 miles of road, where the rest 22 miles of road has about 8 intersections itself. So that little part of that. I would like to focus on that because I think that's why people don't coming through here, but they will be coming here. And as we focus on the development along that corridor with the auto mall and all those other things, it's gonna impact, it's gonna be huge for our city. We have a great time to take advantage of the things that are coming to our neighbors with us. The ballpark just started. People are gonna come here, people are gonna come baseball. Let's focus on talking to these developers and let's get some nice hotels in that area so that these people have a place to stay. And we can also attract these national tournaments with these sports complexes that are coming. We just need to get these things here. If we build it, they will come. So let's get work in and have seats at the table and let's make some things happen.
Thank you. I'm going to have you two remain. This time, we will begin with you, Chris. This next question is on transparency. Do you feel Harriman City is transparent in their business dealings?
Okay, let's do it. Transparent in business dealings. This is hard. It's hard to manage government and be transparent in all things. Now, the things that the city can be transparent in, I believe they are. It's a very boring process to see through the transparency. There's not anyone that's on city staff or the council that could probably explain how all the decisions are made. They are well thought out, the reports, the city packets for city council meetings. Most of that is public available information. All the things that are publicly available are sent to me. And running in the candidacy, it's kind of one of the things that the city does. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of information in there, guys. It's there. If you request it, you can get that and see how decisions are made. I think the city is transparent enough. Other cities that I've lived in don't have quite the involvement with city council or watching city council meetings and paying attention to that. I appreciate that. I like the fact that I am on live and I'm on YouTube and Facebook and people are watching from home and it's great and people are engaged in the city that way. I think we all learned that with the pandemic, but being transparent and requesting that information, I think the city is right on with that. There are some decisions that we can uncover. One thing with government is we like to hire consultants. In my experience in following the consultant is following the money and seeing what kind of deals are there. And so I would kind of focus on that for transparency and who's saying what and why are they saying that? What's the reason? Is it actually a study or has that study been molded to fit a certain priority that someone else has that could benefit them and not everyone?
Thank you. Chair.
Is Harriman City transparent in its business dealings? I guess that depends on your definition, right? What somebody's definition of transparency is. My answer would be that in the past, before my involvement, early on in my involvement, I would say no. And that's one of the major reasons I got involved in that process, as I mentioned. I didn't get straight answers. I got misinformation. In my opinion, I was flat out lied to many times. It definitely seemed like deals were being made in the back room, right? And they were coming out in the council meeting saying, here's our decision, when all discussion was had behind closed doors. I think it's much better now as a result of the organizing that resident group that I talked about, having people at every single planning commission meeting, every single council meeting. They knew the public was watching and they would hear it from the public. I would organize them to write to mass email and show up and have extra meetings, et cetera. And I think we successfully have changed that culture a bit. Changing city management has been a big part of that. And now with kind of the current makeup of the council that we have, I think we have 5 committed people to doing that. There are other meetings that happen. We get lobbied by developers all the time. Let me take you to lunch and show me those things. I personally tell them, no, I don't do those things. If you want to meet me here at City Hall, where everybody can see and the door's open and they can hear what we're talking about, fantastic. Public rules, dictate that if there's a quorum, so in our case, 3 or more council members, it has to be a publicly noticed meeting. And we've said repeatedly, I guess a good example is a current development. DII is asking for extra time to show us all those things, and we've said, no, we can schedule times where the public can view all of those discussions. So I would say that there's always more work to do, but we've come a long, long way, and it's really a result of the public being involved in forcing that change.
Thank you. Gentlemen. Steve, this time we will begin with you. Do you feel Harriman City is transparent in their business dealings?
Yeah, now you're going to get me fired up. That's a big part of the reason why I'm here. I don't believe that, I want to be careful and respectful of your rules, so let's put it this way. I'm not sure that Harriman City has always had this level of transparency that we have now. 2 quick anecdotes. First, if you know the story of Horton Hears the Who, or Horton Hears a Who, there's a tiny little city on a speck that falls in a flower. Horton, being an elephant with the big ears, can hear the people yelling, but nobody else can hear them. Sometimes I feel like, as a city council member, I'm one of the little people on the speck yelling, writing stuff all over Facebook, publishing things, speaking out, having really long monologues in our city council meetings, probably why they go 5 hours. Doing everything I can to explain things ad nauseum, but if people aren't listening, they're not getting that transparency. So we need residents to be engaged and informed and listening and watching so that they can understand what we're doing. I also want to contrast. South Jordan just annexed 2,200 acres from Rio Tinto into the city. Most of the residents didn't know a dang thing about it. They have no idea what's been discussed. They have no idea what's coming. They have no idea how many houses are planned out there. They have no idea what the densities are. I'm more informed than most of the residents of South Jordan. To contrast that, when we annexed Olympia, we actually developed a new process in our city for handling the negotiations for the Master Development Agreement. This is the single most transparent process in the history of the state of Utah. No other Master Development Agreement negotiation has ever had so much transparency and so much accountability to the public, and that is because of the people that were on this council fighting for transparency.
Thank you. Matt,
Yeah, go ahead and repeat the question.
no problem. Do you feel Harriman City is transparent in their business dealings?
I really do. I've been very happy with the fact there's one thing that I think that more so than transparency, accessibility. The website's a great spot for information. It saves for a lot of phone calls, saves for a lot of things, but do I feel like our website has a lot of information and I have no clue where to find that info to be transparent? I'm sure I've never felt like it wasn't being transparent. It's just been a little bit difficult to find some of the answers at times. I think that's more of the key. But yes, I think that Harriman has been very transparent. Both of them have mentioned, the city council meetings. I have been in cities. I used to attend, when I lived in St. George, I would attend those city council meetings, and there was a lot of closed door stuff. And what just happened? They just came in, and all of a sudden, what did they talk about? And that doesn't happen here as much. I love how we are Facebook Live, and again, it's all tied to transparency. But I think my only thing would be is touching to that base. People, unfortunately, the demographics are changing, and people are on their cell phones all the time. maybe an app or something that's already there, that's push notifications, stuff like that. I mean, sure, people see on Facebook that there's a city council tonight, and the city does a great job on Instagram saying, hey, this event is coming up. But I think that the transparency isn't the issue as much as the accessibility and catering to the citizens of, I think a lot of them do want to get involved, but it's overwhelming if you were to go to the website and look for even the city council minutes. It takes a minute or two to actually find that. So, but yeah.
Thank you. We're going to have you two remain. To make this even, I'm now going to come back to you, Steve, and we are going to start with a question about infrastructure. How do you feel about the implementation of a broadband fiber network within Harriman City?
I love it. As a member of the Harriman Internet Task Force, I have been deeply involved in the entire process for 3 years. I can speak to all of the alternatives, all of the decisions that we've made, the conclusions that we made, the impacts, the pros and cons, what other cities have done, where they failed, the mistakes they've made, how our options are correcting that. And I can say with great confidence, our solution is not only unique, but it protects the residents and the taxpayers from any liability on it, and it sets it up to be the most successful municipal broadband network that exists in our state and possibly in the country. I'm incredibly supportive of it, not only because I think most people are getting confused because they think that this is the creation of a new internet service. Yes, internet will be a byproduct of what we do, but the network that we're building is the key piece of infrastructure that is going to make all the rest of our city work better in the future. It will create cost savings, it will create efficiencies, it will help us with our traffic issues. We can't build enough roads to get ourselves out of some of the traffic issues that are coming. It's using a broadband network with advanced technologies that are going to help us manage traffic better. Adaptive timing on the lights so that they're, depending on how much traffic is there, the light will last longer or shorter. So at the middle of the night, you don't have to wait 4 minutes when there's no traffic and you're stuck at a red light. But during the day, when there's a mile of cars, maybe they let the light go a little bit, let a few more cars get through. Those are the kind of things that we're going to be accomplishing when we get this broadband. If you guys want to know more, I did a 45-minute presentation in our last city council meeting. It's recorded. If you have any questions, call me.
So I'm still torn on it. Sorry, Steve. I'm still torn. I remember the survey that went out a few years ago. This is me as a regular citizen. I remember the survey. There was big things on the website asking. I believe I took it. I didn't know what I was taking. I just thought, oh yeah, internet. I think that there's a lot of people in the city that are in the same boat. I was out at an event on Saturday where I met a couple that live actually in Sherry's area. Actually, they were, I guess, neighbors of Sherry. So I asked them what their thoughts were, and they said, "What are you talking about?" I go, "Well, there was a big meeting about it. You know, it's fiber internet. It's supposed to make it accessible to the entire city. It's, you know, they're going to do it as a utility fee." They're like, "Wow, I guess I need to go look at this." So I think the only suggestion, I'm not going to say whether I'm for or against, because I, just like a citizen, I'm catching up a little bit on where that is. But I think that says it in and of itself that I don't think it was ready to move forward just yet, because I think there is still a large portion of residents that have no clue what is going on. Now, that kind of goes back to what I said before, accessibility. The accessibility of that information, sure, we can post it on a website, but are we really reaching a huge audience? I know that there were some pretty good numbers turned out on that, but surveys are, you know, sometimes I'll start taking it and get like 3 questions in, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting bored of this, but I want to hit submit because I don't want those 3 questions to the labor to go out the window. So I'm just going to hurry and tap something really quick so I can get through this and then on to the next thing. I think that maybe citizen action committees could be, I know that the council and Steve and Sherry specifically have worked tirelessly on this project, but I think citizen action committees may be a nice gesture. So I'm going to say I'm not sure.
Gentlemen. Jared, we'll start with the same question, beginning with you this time.
Okay.
How do you feel about the implementation of a broadband fiber network within Harriman City?
Feel is a difficult word. That's an emotional word for me. I'm not a tech guy. As long as this thing works, and if it doesn't work, I hand it to my teenage kid that can show me how to do it. I mean, I can work the email, my text, the phone, and the couple of business apps that I have to use, and other than that, I mean, these guys all laugh. I mean, I show up with my notepad instead of my computers and things, right? So I'm the guy that, as long as it works, I'm great with it. I have no complaints with my current system. You can watch all of the meetings that we've discussed all of this. When it boils down to the issue, there's a couple things. One, our cul-de-sac is underserved, right? The private sector has not responded to the need. So many more people, including myself, are working a lot more from home. Education needs at home. Everything's a smart device. Our air conditioner went out. I bought a window unit for our bedroom, and that thing won't turn on unless it connects to my smartphone. It was insane. But we're underserved. There's only a few providers. They treat it like a monopoly already, and they don't care about the cul-de-sac. I'm sure everybody has a story or frustration about that. On the city side of things, what I've seen is the employment centers, commercial entities, that's at the top of their list. Here's our requirements when we look at locating in an area. It's at the top of the list, and if we don't have it, they move on to somewhere else. And again, the private sector is not meeting that need. What Steve and Sherry, the two council members that were on that committee, have gone through over a year and a half. There's tons of information. If you're not sure, I'd encourage you to go and look at that information. They've done a great job in making some initial recommendations. Nothing's being rolled out. The decision that we've made is one in a series of decisions to proceed to the next step, right? So this first step is simply saying, if we're going to do it, we believe this is the right way to do it for all these reasons. We need to figure out the rest of the details and make those decisions as we have all those details. We'll roll out that massive communication to everyone. Two main things: no risk to the city, no taxes, and no one will be forced to connect to it. Everyone can raise their hand and say, I don't want it, I don't need it.
Thank you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
I'll just take a stab at it.
Go for it.
Fiber. So last night, World Series, lots of sports. October is a great month for sports. Our internet and our TV is through the air, the cloud. I missed 2.5 innings of a very important baseball game last night. That's how I feel about fiber. It's important because when we built our home, I went and I bought the best Ethernet that I could buy, and I ran it throughout my home, hoping that I'd have this great internet connection. And then I found out the internet company, and I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm like, I'm not dealing with them. That's a bad adult decision right there. So we found other options, and it's working except for when there's a baseball game on. So I'm excited about the plan. There's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns I have about what's coming and how we implement it. There's a lot of things that are going to take time. I'm worried about how much time it's going to take to get through these issues because there are important decision makings. One of those things is, how do we opt out of it? I think if a resident wants to opt out of the utility fee, they have every right to do so, and that needs to be a simple process of them writing an email to the city saying, this is my parcel number, this is the property that I own or that I am paying a mortgage on, and I don't want the hookup, thank you, see you later. And that should be kind of it. We don't need to make it a complicated process, but the fiber needs to come. The technology, the things that we could use as a city for it, in the public safety avenue alone increases safety. The traffic, that has been mentioned. That would be huge. There's a lot of things that are decided now today in a digital world, and we need to be able to have the infrastructure that supports that to coming, because it will be an economic driver for our community.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to take a 5-minute break to allow you to take a second step away. We're going to come back here at 7:15. You can leave as well if you need to step away for a moment. We're going to return at 7:15. Jared and Chris, we will begin with you on the next section, which will also be within the infrastructure. So let's take a 5-minute break. So let's go ahead and jump back in. We are going to begin with you, Jared, if we may. The questions are based on infrastructure once again. The first question is, parking has long been a concern in Harriman with many people parking along the streets. How would you make sure developers address the parking concern and require adequate parking throughout their respective developments?
Oh, my Lord. So, yeah, Steve and I could go on forever. How do we make sure the developers have enough parking? Talk to your, I was just talking to this gentleman in the hallway, talk to your state legislature. They make the rules, the standards of how many parking spaces there are per units, et cetera. We hold them to the letter of the law, and as far as I know, at least in my time, have not made exceptions to less parking. In fact, we've looked for every opportunity to add more parking. Steve mentioned with these MDAs, the master development agreements, looking for ways to claw things back. This is one of the things on those lists. But there's only so much we can do to the letter of the law. We're always looking for ways to require more. One of the biggest problems is, frankly, all the HOAs. They're mainly HOAs because the developers wanted to have, quote, private streets, which are narrower than a public street. Doesn't cost them as much money to build it. They pocket more money when people who buy their houses there. And then they still have people park on the streets, and they don't have, the driveways weren't long enough. We actually made some rules that they had to have longer driveways so they could fit their trucks in front of the townhomes and those sorts of things. But the parking in those areas is mainly an issue because they are private streets, and the developers run the legislature and make those rules. So we do everything that we can to hold them to their commitments and look for ways to add those back. And I think we're starting to make some progress where some of those developers are starting to give on those things because they see their handiwork at play now, right? And they're still wanting to build in the city, so they're having to come with good faith and actually do some things there. But there's not a lot of, for lack of a better term, screws we can turn, right, to make them change.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, let's do that.
No problem. Parking has long been a concern in Harriman with many people parking along the streets. How would you make sure developers address the parking concern and require adequate parking throughout their respective development?
Pass an ordinance that requires every new home to have a setback of 50 feet. I'm kidding. There's certain things that this is interesting because I have the neighborhood I built in. It is definitely a concern. And as we age out and our kids in our community start driving, there's going to be a lot more cars having to park on the street. A couple of things that come in with that is, again, just I think I've mentioned it before, but working with these planned, these development plans and saying, hey, where's the parking? Where are we doing that? If we're going to have a private road for an HOA, we need to realize that these cars, and there's so many communities that exist now in Harriman, they park their cars out on the street, or they park their cars in the city park, or they park it here. They're doing that, and they're walking through it, making sure that there's adequate parking. Now, how that's done, as the city council and how we can influence that, it's a little hard. Like Jared mentioned, the state legislature has passed initiatives and law and statutes and have made things that kind of make this an interesting problem because we can build these neighborhoods and we don't have to worry about where the cars go. Having those discussions and continued working on that as we go on, people are going to need cars. You need currently, even with all the high density, the incline at Anthem, that community, 55 and older, not a lot of people there are driving anymore. There's no mass transit options out here currently, so you have to have a car in Harriman. So we need to figure out ways to where to park it.
Thank you. We're going to have you two come back up. Steve, the question will begin with you at this time. Do you need me to repeat this one?
No, I think I got this one.
Okay.
I think it's important to understand, first of all, what are some of the contributing factors to why there's parking issues. I think Jared rightly pointed out some of the legislative issues, and they refer to textbooks that were written in the 1940s that talk about if you have a house of this size, you need this many parking spots. And they were based on national averages. So they don't understand in Utah we have bigger families and bigger cars, and we need more space. So what starts happening is they used to get credit for if they had a 2-car garage. But if the stairs come down out of your kitchen halfway into that one side of the garage, it's no longer a parking spot. Even though it was credited under state statute, it's not really a parking spot. They say, well, there's a driveway. Well, when the driveway is 10 feet long and you've got a 12-foot truck, you don't have a parking spot. It's just very, very poor execution and looking for ways to circumvent the intention of these ordinances. So what I do is what I have been doing. We have worked really, really hard to develop not only new standards for roads so that they can't build them below a certain width. The HOA roads still have to have a minimum width that will allow parking. In some areas, we've required that they eliminate parking on one side of a street to make sure that there's no congestion. Another thing is, in reference to some of the new development here that DAI is putting together in the South Hills, we've completely eliminated. If there's stairs on that side, doesn't count. If the driveway isn't a certain length, doesn't count. They're overbuilding parking for every new house that's going in, and it's because of our adamant stance about how these things have to be fixed and the efforts that the council's been putting forth in renegotiating these master development agreements at every opportunity.
Matt, do
Can
you
you
need
go
me
ahead
to
and repeat,
repeat?
please? Yeah.
Yes. Parking has long been a concern in Harriman with many people parking along the streets. How would you make sure developers address the parking concern and require adequate parking throughout their respective developments?
So this is a big topic, as you mentioned, because I'm living in a HOA and a sub HOA, and this got brought up. It was actually taken straight to an ADA complaint because somebody couldn't get up in their wheelchair because there were so many trucks and cars that were overhanging on the sidewalks. And luckily, it ended up turning out fine, but it's those kind of things that we'd like to avoid. I think the biggest problem right now, and this one's one that none of us can fix, is that we're paying for decisions that were made 8-10 years ago with the master developments, specifically in Rosecrest. We do have a chance in areas like Mountain Ridge, even though that's basically approved, it's still in a building state. There still might be something that can be done, but I think this leads into, what can we do about parking? Well, District 4 has very high density housing, and the fact that there was this high amount of high density approved without UTA having any bus or public transit service, how could this not have been seen? I mean, it's terrible because we are paying for it, but I think the biggest thing we can do to move forward is get UTA to bring in bus lines, because the tracks isn't going to happen anytime soon if it happens, and we need to be able to attract in people to the area that will be using that don't maybe have a car, because then there's no issue there. It doesn't fix the spot necessarily for the people with cars, because there's always going to be more people with cars, I feel like, in that area than will be taking public transit, but it will be at least a little bit of a stab at the problem. Because there's no way that my driveway is going to be extended. There's no way that the garage, it's great to hear, I was in that meeting as well. It's great that we're pushing back on the developers, because what are they doing? They want to make as much money as they can, but at what expense? At the expense of our people in the city, our citizens.
We're going to have you two remain. Steve, the question will come to you to begin with. What plans do you have for water conservation, and what additional steps do you think the city could take to conserve water?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a city, we voted a couple of years ago to implement new water standards that required conservation for all new development. Everybody had to follow these new, more stringent standards. And we've saved a substantial amount of water. The city, our public works has done a bang-up job in terms of monitoring and managing our sprinkler systems to avoid any loss in water. What's exciting is that during the drought period, when everybody was being forced to use so much less water, we saw a pretty significant decrease. This last winter, with all the water and a pretty wet summer, we didn't see an uptick in use. So that conservation mindset has been established across our city through great efforts and communication. On a go-forward basis, we just had a discussion about this. We've talked about secondary water versus culinary water. And one of the things that's a very interesting thing is that secondary water costs about 15% less than culinary water. But people who use secondary water use about 15% more water. So they really don't save any money having the secondary water. As a city, we recognized that the construction of new secondary water lines throughout the rest of our city was going to cost a lot of money. We recently made the decision to stop building new secondary water lines in all new developments throughout the rest of the city. It's not only going to save the city about $55 million in infrastructure costs, but the fact that we don't have secondary water and we'll be using culinary water at culinary water prices, I think is going to have a curtailing effect on the amount of water that people use.
So I agree with a lot of what he's saying, and I love that the council did approve of that. I think people that aren't going to approve of this are going to be in different districts, maybe not in District 4, since I know that secondary water is, largely for landscaping, and I know that so far there have been new standards put in place in District 4 to xeriscape or use water-wise. That I mentioned the park earlier that was just built, Juniper Crest Park behind my house, and they did a fabulous job with that. They, putting in the grass that really doesn't need, they water this grass. Probably doesn't need to be watered as much as it is, but it's water-wise. The xeriscaping, I think that's the biggest push that the city can do, working with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. I think that there were some missed opportunities a couple years ago when they were offering, I think it was a 50-50 basically for residential. And I believe that now they've pulled back, like, oh no, not for HOAs, not for business use. It's still for residential. But how does that affect somebody like me in a townhome? I'm still paying for water through my HOA, that secondary water, and I actually voted while I was on the board to xeriscape half of the community, not the full part, because there were people that, hey, we want kids to play in the grass. I'm not saying get rid of the grass. I'm saying let's do substantially less grass. I was very disappointed along Sentinel Ridge when they were starting to build out Academy Village and putting in the main infrastructure. They're watering weeds, and there's water just going all over the place. The state put in that whole thing to say, tell us if there's overwatering. I put in so many requests there. I think it was either a city or a state level. Never saw anything. I walked my dogs past it, just wasted every single night. So I think that's the other thing that we can do is holding people like the developers accountable for those things. All it takes is simple walk through some of these neighborhoods sometimes, by us officials because, clearly me as just regular Joe did not get anything done when I followed the methods that they told me to follow. But those are the things that little things will add up. And I truly think that xeriscaping in Harriman has done a good job with that already. I think we really just have to keep the momentum going. There's not a whole lot to change right now. We just have to keep keep the citizens aware that this is still an issue, and hopefully we have another winter that has a lot of water and we don't see an uptick like we did this last year either.
Thank you. Gentlemen. Chris, we'll begin with you. What plans do you have for water conservation, and what additional steps do you think the city could take to conserve water?
Just right off the bat, as funding becomes available, let's look at what's offered with other grants and other things that are happening with the xeriscaping of unusable grass space. I've done a lot of research in this, looked at it as being on the HOA board of my neighborhood, looking at our unusable space. I think we were fortunate in our neighborhood because we were promised a park, and because of the cost of constructions, when it was time to finish that space of HOA property, they just put in boulders. It's beautiful. It isn't the best use of space for our neighborhood, but it takes zero water. So if we look at that and what the balance is of how we're working with that and just getting those water-wise decisions. I support, adjusting sprinklers. Again, in my neighborhood, I'm part of the management of that. This week I noticed that the sprinklers were on in the middle of the day. What? So I, got on the phone and had that kind of figured that out. And why are they on this late in the October season? Well, most of us have already winterized that system. And so I think there's things that we can always do to look at water conservation. I'm open to discussions because it is a valuable resource. As we're going on with development in Salt Lake County and we're trying to fill the Great Salt Lake, there needs to be a better balance and some more discussions with all of the stakeholders across in our drainage to kind of figure out how we're going to resolve these issues. I like the fact that they had the secondary water discussion because the secondary rate is, there's not real much of a financial advantage to secondary water. So I'm glad that we made those decisions to, moving forward, not install those systems.
All right, may I have you two remain, please? This next question is still on infrastructure, and we will begin with you, Jared. How do we find ways to get...
So do I get to answer the water one?
Oh, no, you don't get to answer that one. No, absolutely. I went ahead and I just went ahead and
I have no
moved.
problem with speeding this thing up.
No, please,
at
please,
all.
please. No, please. All yours, go ahead.
So plans for water conservation, and sorry, what was the second part?
So the question was, what plans do you have for water conservation and what additional steps do you think the city could take to conserve water?
Additional steps for the city. So really, what plans are the ones that have been mentioned that we've already put in place, right? So the new standards, we were the first city in our area to implement those standards and kind of set the bar, and others have followed suit. I have to credit Sherry Orn, who was our representative on the Jordan Valley Water District Board, for really championing that and bringing a lot of this information to us, which is one of the reasons that we're really ahead on some of these things. We have and will continue to promote programs like Flip Your Strip, rebates for smart controllers. I know I took advantage of that. My water use went way down, and they paid for that expensive controller that is one of those things that has to hook to my internet. Secondary versus culinary is a big one. There's an idea that secondary is somehow better, but it's still that drop of water, and we're building dual infrastructure, dual delivery systems, dual sources, and there just isn't enough. The fact of the matter is that Harriman, South Jordan, the county, the state are pushing for more and more, I shouldn't say Harriman is, but those entities are pushing for more and more homes to be built out here. It's dry farms. We're not reusing a water source. We're putting people that use a lot of water every day where there isn't any to provide it. It's coming from farther and farther back in the mountains. So it's a huge issue. A couple of things additional things that we've talked about that were brought up in recent meetings. One that I kind of pushed the button on was, look, we need to develop our sources. We have wells and we have water shares that we aren't using. We need to put those to work. The current plan for those wells is to improve them enough they can be used to charge the existing secondary lines that are there. If that's not feasible, then I suggested that we should really look at, and I think there's support, we should look at trading those shares or selling that water to Jordan Valley in exchange for our treated culinary. So I think there's several more things we can look at.
Thank you. Now the question I was very excited to ask. Starting with you, Jared. How do we find ways to get more amenities in the city, such as a swimming pool?
Oh man, where do I start on this one? So amenities. So I'll go back to my comments of at least for me, my primary focus and friends and neighbors that I talk to is, look, there's limited tax money, and the focus of the city needs to be those primary services, right? Water, roads, public safety. Open space amenities are part of that. I said that to me, they're a lesser part. They're still needed. They're needed for health and human well-being, et cetera. but there's only so much money to go around. One of the things that's in place, say, I'll mention the Harriman Athletic Center, right? So as part of our group that got involved for the open space that developer had to donate, we required that and got the city to agree to put it all in one spot, right? Rather than small little pocket parks and trails and things. We got 40 acres in one spot. We can have a real park that now we're trying to partner with the county, South Jordan, Rio Tinto for the athletic complex. So we've dedicated that 40 acres, will be at least 6 to 7 sports fields back to the water. We're proposing all artificial turf, right, to save on those sorts of things. But we have to work with other entities for those things. I will say right now, there's no way Harriman City itself will ever afford a swimming pool. They are so expensive to operate. Unless we want to take that money away from other things. There's only so much discretionary money. Steve said we can't move money from bucket to bucket, but there's discretionary money every year we put towards those capital projects, more road improvements, water infrastructure, et cetera, parks. We will never have enough money to do it, but we need to partner with Salt Lake County. They're in on the athletic complex. We can partner with other private, public, other nonprofits to bring some of those things in, whether it's arts, sports, parks, pools, the school district, right? There's all those things that have been mentioned that we need to work with those other entities and not try and do all these things by ourselves.
Thank you. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, that'd be great.
How do we find ways to get more amenities into the city, such as a swimming pool?
Swimming pool. A few years ago, I got a call to participate in a survey, and so I answered the questions, and then I got another phone call, and it asked me to come be a panel member for a focus group on a swimming pool. I thought it was interesting that this survey was bought and paid for by Jordan School District, and what was said there. I would like to work there. They're definitely interested. They funded a focus group and actually paid me to go speak for 2 hours about how I felt about a swimming pool in this part of the valley. I would look forward to having that discussion with them. I know that was a want. I think it was pre-pandemic or right during it. So, but there's that demand, and like Jared said, we could work with partnering with the school district and other things to maybe possibly afford that. Other amenities, our trails. I just did the Yeti hunt with my kids, and we went into places of the city with the trails and those amenities that are just amazing. And there's just so much more that we have, and we need to continue to maintain those and look forward to those improvements and keep them. They're a great way to get around the city. I actually just told the elderly gentleman who was in the Jazzy chair how to get through the city to get to Costco to go shopping on his Jazzy chair using our trails and some of our amenities we have here. The dedicated park, also, kind of a great thing. That's going to be a huge driver for our community and bring people here, and just improvement on that. And I would just say that there's a lot of other taxing districts and other things that we're involved in that we need to sit at the table and have discussions with and make these things happen.
Thank you. Gentlemen. Matt, we'll begin with you.
If you repeat.
You bet. How do we find ways to get more amenities in the city, such as a swimming pool?
I think Chris actually made a great point. It reminded me of, I believe that Mount Jordan Middle School, back in the day when they had the pool, I believe that there was some sort of a public partnership with that. Utilizing school funds they're building some really nice schools, and kind of like the auditoriums. Mountain Ridge Auditorium doesn't get used except for maybe a few times for some of the events that the school's putting on. Well, what about all the other community events? I know we have our outdoor stage at Butterfield Park, but it'd be nice to be able to get those. I think that we're overthinking some of these, that we need to own it as a city in order to have it, and I don't think that's always the case. The swimming pool, judging by the last meeting, I think we just throw some chlorine into the reservoir, and we'll just let's call that our swimming pool. People already swim there, but I just think that the amenities of the city. What do people want? We may get a few people here and there that say this or that, and we just have to, as a council, decide on what we're actually going to pull the trigger on. Swimming pool does not seem like one, especially Riverton has one. Draper, not too far away, has one. I think that that's one of those work smarter, not harder. Let's not put in a pool when, people can reasonably go over there. I don't see them pushing people away. The couple of times I've been to those pools in the last couple of years, maybe after COVID, but before COVID, there was normal attendance at the pools and it wasn't something. But I think really just in making it real out to the people, we don't have the funds to put in a swimming pool, but there's always raising property taxes that will increase our general fund, and that seems to quiet some people down. But the other thing to capitalize on is we have great outdoor space that doesn't cost anything, and maybe a little bit to upkeep. The trail system, we need to push people towards that rather than just listening to see what they want. Let's push them towards those different parts of the city that we could benefit from.
Thank you. Same question. Do you need me to repeat it?
No.
Fair.
I'm glad you have the same reaction.
Oh, man. $450 million. $450 million is what the city needs to pay in today's dollars for the planned infrastructure between now and 2050. That is what the budget says that as the city we need to pay for in infrastructure. Right now, we have about 90 million of that planned. We have the revenue for it and we can build it. So there's about $350, $360 million of infrastructure that needs to be built that we don't have the money for. As much as I love amenities, I am a huge supporter of the arts. I am a trumpet player. I played with the Harriman Jazz Band. I performed in last summer's production of Cinderella. I was the king. I would love for us to have an arts facility here. We did a feasibility study to build the one that would serve the region. Is like $80 million to build. Swimming pools are millions. Golf courses are millions. There's just millions and millions and millions of dollars that we don't have. It would be easy to say the school board should just include swimming pools at the high schools. Anybody want their taxes, property taxes to go up to pay for another school? No. Well, the county should just build it. Where do you think the county gets their money from? Your pockets, my pocket. They're going to build those things by taxing us to death. The only way that we're going to get amenities that people in the community want is through public-private partnerships, and even then, I'm not sure that we have the money to build those kinds of things.
I'm going to have you two remain. We're going to move over to a question about housing. This one, we will start with you, Matt. When it comes to residential development, what do you feel is the best negotiation strategy for the city?
The best what kind of strategy?
Negotiation.
Oh, negotiation.
Yes, nuclear.
So when it comes to housing, it being in a very dense spot in District 4 on that other side, there's a lot of frustrations that can come, but I enjoy living in a townhome. I like the closeness of everything. I mean, I don't need a backyard. I don't need a big amount of space, but we've already touched on a few things: the parking, the different amenities in a community, the master HOA situation. If I could ask anything in a negotiation with, maybe with a developer or anything when it comes to that, it would be that they actually take the citizens, the people that are going to be living there, into consideration, because I feel like the last few communities that have been in that area and walking doors, a lot of the same complaints are the same. And I think that really they look to us and as a city council, it's like, well, those decisions were already made a long time ago, but what we can do right now is get people to show up to those meetings, get people to show up to the planning commission meetings. Getting people to speak up, it does a lot. So, I mean, Jared had expressed, how that worked for him, over 10 years ago. That principle still can work today, so that we can, because if we don't know what the citizens are going to complain about, how are we supposed to negotiate with the developers to do the right thing? I mean, we need to hear all of the complaints of what people are dealing with in the current situation in order to make an informed decision, and then we'll know what to negotiate with. But I mean, parking we already touched on. I think that's a big one. Public spaces in general. To break up some of that housing. I love the fact that the new development that was being talked about, DAI, is largely single family home. Steve's largely to credit for that. So I think that we're in the right direction there, but we just need to keep holding them accountable and saying, hey, no, we are going to do this, and we need to present the options.
Negotiating strategy, that's an interesting question. We've tried kicking and screaming, complaining, yelling, threatening, pleading, begging, arguing, you name it. I think we've done all of that. But it's interesting, as a member of the city council, you have a district that you represent, but you also represent the whole city on these matters. And so it's been interesting to not only hear the issues that are specifically in parts of District 4, where there's pretty intense land use and pretty dense development, but that's not the only place in the city where that exists. It just happens to be the area of the city where there's not a lot of other housing alternatives. But listening what's happening in all the different housing types across our city, you kind of understand that the complaints and the issues are a little broader than what they are just for some communities. And I think it's that wider view that's really helped us fight with the developers. And I don't know a better way to say it, but it's been a fight for the last few years. And I think we've finally gotten to a place where, as a city, we were at the disadvantage. We were being leveraged all the time. We were being held over a barrel. Boy, I should let Jared go. He could go on that for a long time. We were just at the wrong end of every negotiation. And it is through a very committed effort, a very focused understanding of what needs to improve, what needs to change, how it's going to impact development, has really helped us solve a lot of these problems. The MDAs that are being written today have solved a bajillion of the problems that existed in the previous MDAs, because we learned from those mistakes and we have corrected them going forward. I think the one thing that's really important, I'm just going to speak to this for a second about housing affordability. Housing affordability is a ratio of how much a house costs versus how much people earn. So much of what happens at our legislature is focused around trying to create houses that cost less. There's not enough being done on economic development and new jobs to create incomes that can afford these houses. It's one of the things I'm really proud of as a city, is our efforts around economic development.
Thank you. Gentlemen. We're going to begin with you, Chris. When it comes to residential development, what do you feel is the best negotiation strategy for the city?
I've talked about my neighborhood quite a bit, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running for city council. It's because there's a lot that was done with that development agreement that I am discovering has been made verbally. As a private person building a home, I did not go into a contract to build something on a verbal agreement. But as I continue to dig and find out why things were built in our neighborhood the way they are and why they look like that, it was because it was said and done. And as I'm discovering with records, and I'm digging and I'm searching through this process, verbal agreements with developers. I don't know if anyone is currently responsible for those verbal agreements, but that's just silly. Negotiation and talking with other people is huge. And coming up with an agreement to better the city, I think I'm well aware that everyone that wants to come here and build, developers alike, want the best for their customers and want the best for the city. But there needs to be contractual memos of understanding, something written down. Because in government, which I've worked in for 15 years, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. That's where I'm going to leave that.
Do you need me?
Oh, I need so much more time.
Okay, fair.
This is, for those that know of me and my efforts in the group that I organize, this is the main thing that we've done for the last 10 years. So first I'll say that the most effective thing was and still is public engagement, right? Decision makers and new developers, if there's a lot of people that are engaged, not just show up for one meeting and send some angry emails, but like with our organized group showed, we were engaged over a long period of time and showed that we cared. They had to listen to us. In that first development that got me involved in all this, it was 300 acres, 3,000 units, right? The city told us flat out to the residents who were saying, we don't want this, you don't understand, we have to do this. If we don't give it to them, they'll annex to South Jordan and South Jordan will give it to them. And I said, that's crazy. So we organized, we made committees to look at public safety and traffic and schools and all those sorts of things. We contacted the developer and said, look, we're not against development. If it weren't for development, none of us would be here, right? But we want to have a say as residents and taxpayers of how it's done and when it's done, right? And protect what I've called the integrity of our neighborhoods and community. So we went to them, they heard that message and sat down with us and we negotiated something far better. We got in that initial agreement from 3,000 units to, I believe it was about 1,800. Now I think we're below 1,700. We got zoning conditions for more than half of it to be single family homes with certain lot sizes. I mentioned the contiguous open space. We took that to the city, us and the developer. And after that meeting, the mayor at the time came up to me and said, thank you so much. You accomplished something we couldn't. And it was at that moment that I realized somebody like me needs to do this. So that, like, public engagement is the main thing. Going forward, most of those big decisions have been made. The main thing that the council and the city need to do is stick to the general plan and the zoning, right? That's what they want to change. We can stick to that.
So we are going to do one last question that has come in. So we're going to have you two remain if we could. And this comes from someone in the audience tonight. They are curious as to what you have done for veterans specifically. And Jared, we're going to start with you.
For veterans specifically, we've supported all the veteran events. I had the privilege of speaking at Memorial Day ceremony. One of the community pride events that we've continued to fund, I believe we're starting to cut back, is the event that morning. I think we're cutting back on the pancake breakfast, but we're still supporting that. Councilman Hodges represents us on the committee that supports those veterans. We arrange for not only our police departments, but for others to participate in kind of honor guards to welcome them home from the airports from different missions and things. We have several events throughout the year, the city, and all those things do cost money, and while every dollar matters, there are those things that do give us roots in the community and have that sense of pride, not just in the area we live in, but the people who live here.
There.
For veterans, what's the question again?
So basically, what have you done for veterans?
What have I done for veterans? Well, I work with a lot of veterans. First of all, thank you for asking the question, and thank you, obviously, for your service. One of the things in my line of work, law enforcement, is we attract that service to others that is seen within our armed forces. So I have the opportunity to work with a lot of them. A lot of my coworkers have been overseas and had seen and done things and have served our country well, all in the name of the great protection of our nation and our people. Veterans Day is coming up. It's next weekend. I'll be at those events, supporting, learning that. One of the things that I think is unique, and that I always try to do with my grandfather, who was a veteran, is kind of support and make sure that he has, on that day especially, the means to get around and just meet and talk with people. I want them to be able to get into the community, to have their honor guards and their ways of whatnot, of their continued service and being engaged. I look forward to working with them and, you know, having maybe a committee, a good discussion, because they are what make they make America, and they are the root of our community, and we owe a lot more than maybe just recognizing them one day a year, but giving them spaces and times and having those events so that they can have an opportunity to be heard and tell their stories and to support those of the older generation and the newer generation. That's all important.
Thank you. Gentlemen? We will start with you, Matt.
Since I haven't really served in official capacity, I want to tell a quick story about how I helped a veteran recently. Actually, I didn't think about this when we were talking about it before. I had a coworker at the news station came to me, and I don't know why he came to me, to be honest. Maybe I just looked like I was helpful or something. He came to me almost in tears saying, I am going to be homeless, and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, and he knew that my husband was in the service and that his dad, and I've had many family members that have served, so maybe that's what kind of drew him to me. But really, I was able to get him out of a housing discrimination. He had places telling him they wouldn't rent to veterans, which if that ever happened in this city, there would be a big slap down on something like that. That should never happen for somebody that served this country. So that was disgusting that there was a place, luckily, not here, but in Murray, that did that to him. And then there was another place that didn't like the schedule, a time frame that he had to move into the place. And because he had to work, they were not willing to give him any allowances to come and move in. And so now the amount that he has to pay is an extra $1,000 to be able to move into the same apartment that he was going to pay $1,000 less the week before. So I guess maybe he knows that I have a big mouth and I know the right people to go talk to at the station. And, well, let's just say somebody made a phone call and threatened, and he got to move in at the regular amount, and he was thrilled. It was... I guess in the end, I was very grateful that he came to me, because it put tears in my eyes when he came into me, and with tears flowing from his face saying, you did this. You made me be able to move into this place, and you are the reason that I have a home to go to instead of living out of my car for 2 more days because they won't let me move in yet. So what have I done for veterans? I feel like that was a pretty good thing, and that was just within the last month, but many more things to come, because they that served us are the reason that we're here today.
Well done, Matt. Thank you. That's an awesome story. I appreciate you sharing that. Thanks for the good work. My father was in the military. My grandfather served in the military. I had the privilege of growing up on military bases. There is just something ingrained in me in the way I was raised that our men and women in uniform, regardless of the service, just have my inherent respect and appreciation. I think people who've been around the military understand that sentiment, that feeling. It's been a real privilege to be a member of the City Council and have the opportunities that come to us to be involved more directly in events and opportunities that serve our veterans. I had the really distinct pleasure of being able to speak at our first Wreaths Across America a couple Christmases ago, to be able to give the speech talking about our veterans and cemeteries all over this country, and being able to help lay wreaths at all of those grave sites. Last year, I had the opportunity to take a group of young people and involve them in that. We went over actually to another city cemetery that morning and helped them lay wreaths at that. It's a real privilege to be able to do things for those veterans that are past as we talk about Memorial Day. When we talk about Veterans Day, there are issues for our veterans that are still alive. It's been a really cool opportunity to be with my dad as he served in the VFW posts in Spanish Fork and now in Pahrump, Nevada. I tell you what, there's not a better group of people to be around hanging out with those guys. They're a little old and crotchety now, but Man, they're fun. I just would speak that I'm proud of the fact that we do fund our veterans and help with a committee here in our city to make sure that we're addressing some of those issues.
I'm going to have you two remain. That was a very personal and direct question. This will be your closing statement for the evening. It also should be a very personal question as to why you should be the choice of the voter, and make that as your closing question and statement. And we will start opposite of the way we began. So you may begin.
Thank you. It is a challenging thing to come up before your friends and neighbors and say, vote for me. I don't like being in that position. I feel like I'm soliciting my neighbors for something. But the reality is that I've put my hat in the ring to serve, and the voters of my district voted me into this position 4 years ago. And it has been a privilege and an honor to represent the residents of my district and the city in so many important things. It is because of this position, not necessarily because of me, but because of this position, that I've been able to influence a lot of really important things in our community. One of the very first conversations I had when I started, in my very first week, was I met with a couple of legislators, and they're saying, you're new on the city council, what are the things that you'd like to see accomplished? What's your biggest thing you'd like to do? And at that point, we were talking about the Salt Lake Community College campus. We had dedicated that land to the state for the construction of that 6 years ago without anything happening. And it was 2 weeks before the legislative session started, and I was able to go in, and through some lobbying, we were able to get the funding for that building to happen that session. Because of COVID, it got delayed to the next session, but nevertheless, we did get it funded that very first session. Since then, I've had an opportunity to work with residents, especially in the Rosecrest HOA, helping to negotiate stormwater outflow solutions so that we can reclaim some of the green space up there. Working with residents to improve communications with the HOA. We've solved problems in Sentinel Ridge Park, parking issues, park maintenance issues, noise issues, towing issues. For those of you who saw, I got kind of fired up about what I thought was a predatory towing issue, and ended up on the news, which is, I don't ever want to have to do that again. You can take that part, Matt, if that comes up again.
No thanks.
We've voted to construct trailheads and parks, restripe streets, fix parking, signage issues, drainage problems, neighborhood complaints, just a whole wide variety of issues that get to come my way that I get to be a part of solving. And I think I've done a dang good job of that. I think on the other hand, I thank you for the opportunity to serve, and I hope that you'll vote for me again this time. Thank you.
Matt.
This was a big decision to go up against somebody like Steve. And I think the biggest thing that I would say to vote for me is I am a good communicator. I love to listen. I love to meet new people. And I think that's been so far the best part. I think about going door to door and talking with people and telling them I'm running for city council, there is a certain level of access, like Steve mentioned. Right now, I'm just an everyday citizen. If I were to walk up and just ask my neighbor, oh, what do you think about this? What can we do about this? It's probably not going to go anywhere because we're just two everyday citizens. But it pulls out something out of somebody when you say, oh, yeah, I'm running for city council. All of a sudden, they have a slew of issues that probably wouldn't have been brought up before, or things of how they can improve. And yeah, not every single thing is going to be great because they're looking at it from their point of view. I think that one of the biggest things is I have a social awareness to read the room. I don't want to be the guy that is condescending or anything like that. I want to be somebody that they feel like anybody can come up and approach me and ask me a question and not feel like they're going to get, an answer that they're not going to understand. I feel like that's one of my biggest strong suits I hate to say dumb it down, because what somebody may not be as intelligent in, they may blow me out of the water with what they know about. I'm not a plumber, but that plumber over there probably knows a whole lot, but he probably has no clue how to navigate the city's website. There are certain things. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I will bring to the table is being able to, I have no problem with walking down the street and walking up to a door, given that most people don't want to answer their door anymore, which is why I chose the door hanger route. But it's been great to still see people sending in emails and asking me how I feel about this, and sending a donation. It really tells me that they want me to do this. It's not saying I want you rather than Steve. It's just saying I see it as they want me, and I leave it at that I feel like I have the capabilities to be that person for them. Of all different backgrounds for the city. It doesn't matter their ethnicity, their ability. I want to be able to represent every single one of them and be able to have a conversation back and forth, and hopefully a two-way education process between me and the other citizens will happen every single time.
Harriman friends, let's go ahead and give applause for District 4 candidates, Matt Bello and Stephen Shields. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. And Chris, you will go first. Please.
It's like a 10-mile walk, by the way. This summer and this year has been rewarding. I was able to ask some questions in the beginning of this year, some concerns that I had, and get some answers, and uncover some things, and ask some more questions, and uncover some more things and ask more questions, and started talking to some people. Before I knew it, I was sitting in the middle of an ocean on vacation with my wife, and she said, "Why don't you just go ahead and do it?" So here I am. There's a lot of things that I look forward to, and this is a thriving community, and I want it to continue to be a thriving community. I love Harriman. My kids love Harriman. My wife loves Harriman. We are here for the long haul. We want to make sure that we are just moving forward in a way that makes sense for everything. I've met a lot of amazing people. Steve said it. It's hard to get up in front of friends and neighbors and go around neighborhoods and ask people to vote for you. And I've done that. I've gone to the community engagement. It started with the parade and Harriman Town Days. How exciting was that to be in a parade and watch through and just look at it and be able to say, hey, we are Harriman, and let's make something big of this. Kind of go through that, and spending hours at the market on Monday nights. I wasn't around last night. I missed it. I want it back. I want it back right now. It'll come back in the spring. But there's just those types of things, being involved in the community and being able to kind of show and work through transparency and saying, hey, you know what, let's address these rumors and let's get down to these issues and let's find those results. I want to be there. I want to be the influencer for Harriman. I want to fight. I already spend, my job brings me to this corner of this valley on a regular basis. It takes me all the way to Salt Lake County. I already protect you. Let me fight for you.
As several have mentioned, this is not easy. I think I've mentioned several times, this is not my favorite thing. I can talk about issues and debate things, but I don't like talking about myself a whole lot. I've given you some insight and maybe reminded some people of how I've gotten here, but credit to anybody who's willing to do this and stand up in front of people and hold their hand up and put themselves out there. It's not easy to do. The job itself is not easy to do. Steve mentioned it's like drinking from a fire hose for 2 years. That's what I've said to anybody new that's come in, is like, I felt like I did not know what I was doing on most of these things for the first 2 years just to learn how it all works. Government works the opposite of everything else. It's insane. It is a whole nother job. If you do it right, it's a whole nother job. I've seen some people come in and just come to meetings and they just go along to get along sort of thing. It's more of a social hour. If you do this job, it is, I even asked people and flat out, they did not tell me, and maybe it's just that I can't do things halfway. I have to go, either I'm 100% or none. It's extremely time consuming, but I'm doing this, continuing to do this because I love where I live and I don't want to have to move because of the short-sighted decisions of others. I've organized my friends and neighbors, they've supported me. We've made tons of progress on some of the things I mentioned tonight and many, many others. With their continued support, I'll continue to not make decisions for them, but represent them. And keep working for those common sense solutions. There's so much more to do.
Our District 1 candidates, Jared Henderson and Chris Roberts. That concludes the evening. I want to thank all of you for sticking around and staying here and enjoying the information that we received. It is very hard to do what all four of you have done tonight. You are laid transparent before all of us and are asked questions that you have not prepared for. It has been a pleasure to be your moderator. Thank you for being so courteous and so kind to each other. It really does speak to what and who Harriman City is. Thank you all, and thank all of you. Have a great evening and a safe drive home.